How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational user interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest, Lauren Kunze. Lauren is the CEO of Pandorabots. Pandorabots is one of the oldest chatbot platforms. Pandorabots enables developers and enterprise the ability to easily build and analyze AI experiences. At present, Pandorabots has processed over 6 billion messages, has had over
60 billion.
60 billion messages.
You realized we were missing a critical zero that actually.
Yes, 60 billion. Yeah, that's 1 0 off. Very significant.
Just a small zero.
Yeah, absolutely. So 60 billion messages. Also has had over 300,000 bots built on their platform and has over 250,000 registered developers currently. Lauren also speaks at various venues such as VentureBeat, Mobile World Congress, as well as Dashbot. At that, Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get started into the more like chatbot technical questions, I always like to ask a rather unique question based upon our guest's background. So I see before your foray into the chatbot space, you had actually published several books, and you also have an English degree from Harvard. So I was curious, did this give you any additional insight into conversational user experiences? And also, do you think there needs to be a greater push to get English and communication majors interested in chatbots?
Absolutely. You sort of answered your own question. What you've said and Googled is true. So I went to Harvard. I studied English literature, language, and neuroscience. And those were two degrees that people questioned whether I would ever use. And I actually use both of them every day. Writing and reading are really two great passions of mine. And I was writing young adult novels full time. I actually started my senior year in college and I wrote 4 books. And I think that has absolutely helped me having that literary background in terms of conversational design. We always say the best people to build bots are writers or people who have a literary background because they actually have a good understanding of how a conversation works. And sort of the different ways that we think about language, because natural language understanding is still an unsolved problem. And it's clearly not going to be solved with a huge amount of data and neural nets, even though those types of technology have led to other breakthroughs in hard AI problems. So I think the more people from different disciplines who are working on this problem, the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as far as like English majors or communication majors getting into the space, do you have any like suggestions on how maybe they should go about it? Because I know there are so many nuances right now just in conversational user experience design. And I don't think any one person has all the pieces put together yet.
Yeah, so I think there is this new role emerging in the Valley called conversational designer. I actually have a lot of friends who were also professional writers, screenwriters, journalists, copywriters. And we actually work with a lot of copywriters, especially inside of our brand clients, on crafting the conversation. I think any screenwriting experience is particularly useful. And then also, in terms of like designing an actual conversation, going into the field and watching how people actually talk is probably the most useful thing you can do. I think when we give this problem to engineers, like a classic example, how do you order coffee? They have a tendency to look for the shortest possible path. And we actually took a field trip into like a coffee place and tried to get everyone to say how they would design the interaction. And the engineers were like, well, I just want to point at what I want. And I said no words. And so, having somebody who actually really understands how to script things and how to design for when the bot doesn't have the right answer is really valuable.
Absolutely. I think those are all great points for people that, want to get into space from an English or communications degree. That's how you can sort of approach that. I think that's really cool. So sort of, turning back the wheel a little bit, And you knew I was going to ask this question, so you have something prepared for our audience here. How did you initially get interested or involved in the space of chatbots and voice?
Yeah, so it's almost a little embarrassing. I've been working on chatbots for half my life. I started when I was 15. The Pandorabots platform was in its infancy or gestation period. The company grew very organically out of an open source hobby project. So at the time, it was something like they wanted to create. Our chief science officer invented a scripting language called artificial intelligence markup language, which the platform supports today. And the goal of the language was to be super, super simple, and kind of like the way HTML is for building websites. So AI/ML, our language, is for building bots. And they wanted it to be easy for anyone to understand and learn. So they grabbed me. I was 15. I had a limited programming background. I mean, I did grow up here in the Bay Area, and I did have a dad who started me writing Lisp programs when I was 5, barely type with my fingers. So they grabbed me and they said, hey, you're gonna build a bot on the platform. And I was like, well, okay, like just don't tell my friends, because I don't want people in high school talking about this. But I did. I built a bot, and I didn't know what to do, so I built the Lauren bot. So I'll just share my screen because it's still online today. It's pretty funny. Maybe I should make this bigger. Can I make this bigger? There we go. So
I love it.
Yeah, this is the Lauren bot. She's got a very cool Pocahontas avatar using Flash. This was my early monetization strategy.
Nice.
Banner ads, probably made like $10 over 15 years. By the way, this ad for a .bot domain name from Amazon.com, from Amazon Registry Services, actually, is something everybody should get to get an identity for your bots. I did not plan that, but we're a bot platform partner of Amazon. So if you build a bot on Pandorabots, you can reserve a .bot domain. Side note. Anyway, so this is my little bot. Oh, she's not talking because I have the volume off. I'm Lauren. Who are you? Yeah, so when I was a teenager, I thought it was like a good idea to tell people on the internet where I was.
Right, exactly,
Piedmont, right, like you do. Actually, like still issues that are relevant today on bots and privacy and like what people say in conversation. And my bot won this little award, the Diva Bot Contest. And here was the original Pandorabots. So yeah, that's my deepest, darkest, nerdiest secret. I'll stop sharing now.
That is super rad. So like what year was that? You would say like 2000?
2002 or 3.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's very funny when everyone, when people are like, oh, bots, it's a new thing. Because there are actually like a lot of companies in the early 2000s, and there have been a couple of hype cycles. The first one was with kind of AOL Instant Messenger and Smarter Child. Messaging was really big. And then we actually had a lot of developers monetize in the mobile app era with personal assistants or entertainment applications that featured chatbots. And then we have today, which is kind of the messaging wave and the rise of messaging and voice devices in the home, which has kind of spawned this third wave of hype. I think this time is real, but one thing that is still missing, like usually a hype cycle is catalyzed by a technology breakthrough. And in this case, I think the hype cycle was catalyzed by a massive shift in consumer behavior to messaging and not a technology breakthrough. The breakthrough in natural language understanding hasn't happened yet. We don't really know when it's coming. So we're designing these very narrow vertical specific applications that can get things done from a business perspective, but there's still a long ways to go. So in some ways we're like very late to the party. We're like hip dinosaurs, but in other ways it still feels like we're so early in the space.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really insightful point there, that there's been multiple hype cycles. Chatbots aren't new, everyone. But, I think the interesting thing is that I think a lot of people think that like some of the, like a major underlying driver is like all these NLP, NOU engines that currently exist. I mean, I guess, are people's expectations too high, or why do you think that is? Because, I think a lot of people are super hyped up, and you're saying that, these platforms have a long way to go right now.
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy is it's so important to under promise and over deliver. And there's so much hype out there that even like the word AI is kind of
Yeah.
a marketing term at this point. You have to be very results focused in terms of what the bot can actually do, especially when you're working with an enterprise in terms of making money and saving money, and designing in a way that sets consumer expectations. Because I think consumers have been slow to adopt this technology, and it's because there are a lot of bad experiences out there. Because building a good conversational system is really, really hard. It's something that takes a long period of time, a lot of data collection, and actually somebody working on the system every day as real production data comes in to constantly improve it. So I think like understanding that it's a continuous, like real-time supervised training process that gets the job done over a period of time, and that you need these like large cross-functional teams to build anything good. You can't just stitch something together with a GUI in 5 minutes is really important.
No, that's very, very fascinating. So it's almost like, maybe you may have like an idealized benchmark of where platforms should be at this point. Because I know there's a lot of research going into natural language generation and improved intent entity models that are much more scalable, like that can address a lot more depth and a lot more context in a more natural format that I don't see yet. Although current platforms can do a lot, I think you're absolutely right. Like there is like this like upper bound of what is like viable and realistic. Like I could spend like maybe like a month trying to build something really simple, really well, but at the same time I'm spending a month building something really simple. So is your sort of idealized benchmark that it's like we can build like these somewhat complex, robust conversational user interfaces, but like in half the time that it takes now?
Half the time would be good. I think like starting from the premise of understanding that most of the work in building a chatbot happens after launch is critical. You said a couple of different things that I want to touch on. The first one is like intent and entity NLP APIs. They don't work for a couple of different reasons. Like, first of all, from a neuroscience perspective, we don't understand how the brain works. When you go into your intro to neuroscience class at Harvard, they plop this textbook down and it's 1,000 pages, and they say, we think maybe this represents 1/10 of like what we know, and then what we don't know is at least 90%. And so language is one of those things that makes us fundamentally human. Obviously, animals do have language, and there's some debate as to whether or not animals have consciousness. But humans are uniquely conscious entities, and the way that we can transmit language through writing is really what sets us apart from other species. But we don't actually know how it works. So the idea that I can say an utterance which has one fundamental unit of meaning, which is called an intent, and then my application should take an action, that works for one type of conversation, command control, or what I like to call shut up, obey me, which is basically just like, I want to get something done. Like I want to book a ticket and the system can recognize it. If it's a pure classifier-based approach and you say, I want to book a ticket from San Francisco to New York, like the system, like a Watson type system is like, okay, San Francisco is a place, New York is a place, you want to book a ticket, I don't know which direction you're going. So like they can kind of understand like your intent, but the meaning is still lost. And I think we're going to have to go a lot wider to encapsulate different conversational use cases. And these systems have other problems. They're black box systems. When they get it wrong, there's no way to debug the system. And in order to be effective, you need, thousands of training examples in order for the system to get the right answer. And most people don't have that kind of data, or they do have the data, but it's really messy and it's not clean or labeled. So there are a lot of problems with kind of what is state of the art today.
Cool. We'll definitely dive more into that conversation a bit later in this interview here, but I definitely love where you're taking this, like from neurology, all the way to, okay, like where can we go to with some of like these advancements past, intent entity models right now. So I totally love that. Can you maybe talk about some of the initial successes that you guys saw that were really compelling? Like once the platform was getting off the ground, and it's like, not like, you don't have to talk about like all of them obviously, but like some of those like landmark ones that really inspired you guys.
Yeah, okay, sure. Well, I think anytime like a developer or a team of developers makes enough money on their bot to just like fund their company or their lifestyle is awesome. So I mentioned some of those mobile applications. There was an assistant called Skyvee. That team actually joined Google and works at Google Assistant several years ago. There was a cute little alien character app called Izar that had 10 million downloads. And obviously, like I think we're most famous for, in some ways, our most famous bot on our platform is Mitsuku, which is widely considered the best conversational chatbot in the world. It's won this Turing test contest called the Loebner Prize 3 times. It's going for 4 this year. We were actually recently featured on Radiolab, and we did like a live Turing test for their audience, which was really cool. And we actually fooled 45% of the people in the audience with a text-based version. And that's a bot that, the creator, Steve Warsick, has been working on for 10 years. And that's why it's very good at understanding conversation and keeping context. And I think what's really cool is just how much people love the bot. It does about 1 million interactions a day, and it's on all the major messaging platforms. And people, like the longest recorded conversation was 9 hours. So yeah, somebody was in the hospital, I think, and they were born. Cool. Yeah, and then like people, the longest broadcast conversation was on YouTube, and it was 1.5 hours. So she has this like very cult following. And what we see people using Mitsuku for, or what The Guardian said, was that it's an app for loneliness. Which I think is cool. I think there are a lot of use cases in like senior care and companionship that people aren't really focusing on. So yeah, I like those.
Cool. No, I love it. Just thinking about it took 10 years to get to this place where we can pass a Turing test consistently. I think that almost might be.
Well, we can't. I don't know if we would say pass, but sure. Definitely closest.
Yeah.
And it's not clear that the Turing test is even like a good benchmark, but it's definitely something like that people get very excited about from like a cult and media perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think maybe it like just goes to show it's like if it takes 10 years to get to that point, what underlying technology or sort of best practices interplay needs to take place so we can like cut that down so it's like tomorrow at enterprise to get to this level, right? So no, absolutely. I think that's a really great example.
Yeah, but it's also like it's important to think about how hard the problem is, like general conversation. Like if you look at Alexa's like not very good at talking to you, and there's 1,000 people on the team working. Like they probably have too many cooks in the kitchen. But if you think about all and hundreds of millions of dollars, Siri also represents hundreds of millions of dollars and hundreds of people on the team to get to the point where they are today, where consumers are still regularly frustrated.
Yeah, no, and I think It's interesting how you say that too, because it's because these models right now are sort of that command and control too, right? It's like I say something, it does it for me. It's not really conversational, right? And it's so interesting how you have so many people and still that is sort of the extent of conversational user interfaces at like this like enterprise scale. So, I think we do have a long ways to go. Speaking of that, speaking of the initial successes, can you also maybe talk about some of the initial challenges or failures? Because I think that's also really fascinating because I think, especially in any emergent technology, no matter what stage it is, I think the failures are almost as eye-opening or the obstacles and how we sort of figure out how to go around them.
Absolutely. So you mentioned natural language generation as a type of AI technology too, that a lot of people are working on, which is super interesting, but in my opinion will almost never work for a large brand. So one of our early epic fails, and yes, there are many failures and you learn from them all, was basically we built a system that was too robust. It was for a large credit card company, and this was years and years and years ago. And they hired us to build a turnkey solution, so we did everything in-house. And then it had to go through multiple levels of approval at the company through various different stages, including legal. And it just couldn't get through because the system could say and answer so many things. And we died in review. So that was a very important lesson in how you structure builds and the people that are involved and the teams. We've also had issues, again, referencing too many cooks in the kitchen. We've done builds with agencies, and we have great agency relationships. We've been working with the top 10 global agency for 3 or 4 years now, and they actually have a dedicated subsidiary with half creatives and half writers who can build bots on our platform. And so when that relationship works, it's amazing. But sometimes if you get a third party in the middle, like an agency who doesn't have the deep partnership and bot expertise, then just the layers of communication and approval about what the system is allowed to say get compounded into this ugly game of telephone, and you end up getting nothing done. So understanding that you should work directly with a brand and who needs to be on that team, which is a product manager who owns the whole product, a user experience designer who hopefully does user research and testing with real users and the bot, people handling QA, engineers for any API integrations or integrations into back-end infrastructure, copywriters, conversational designers. A lot of text-based bots have a visual component, so you usually have someone from the art department who's creating GIFs, making the emoji. So it's really, you have to have all those people in the loop from the beginning, including legal. And I think one thing that's cool as our industry matures is that these best practices are starting to emerge. Most people I think would agree, and we strongly advocate that you identify as a bot upfront in a conversation if you are a bot. And it's very clear when you're talking to a bot and if you get handed off to a human or handed back. But with GDPR and all this privacy stuff and having to be even more explicit about what data you're collecting, we're starting to see legal in the conversation earlier, and they're impacting the design of hey, these are the things that the bot has to say up front. So making sure you have the right team and don't try to build in a vacuum. We've also had the experience where we've undertaken a year-long build in a vacuum where we had a ton of data to work with. So we thought we really understood everything that people would possibly say in the context of conversation with this brand. And then we put it out there, and what people said in production to the system when it was conversational, totally different, totally unexpected. So that's why I said earlier, most of the work happens after launch. Even if you have a lot of data, what people say is going to be different in production, and you have to be ready to constantly iterate.
Definitely. I love all those points. I want to dive into them a little bit. So I think it's I think you're right. I think natural language generation, from what I've seen as well, is not really commercially viable yet, public facing. At least you didn't have the same fiasco as Tay. Because it was actually funny. We actually had Lily Chang at one of our previous meetups. And that was literally,
I love Lily.
Lily is awesome.
Hi, Lily.
We love Lily too. Yeah. That was so funny because literally that was the first thing she wanted to address, but she knew she was going to get hit with some of those questions. So I think it is definitely a learning experience, you know, whether it's a small agency or whether it's a large enterprise company that's, you know, playing with NLG, natural language generation technology right now.
Well, I think what Tay really teaches us is about human nature and not, like, yes, it was a flaw in the design of technology work, but it's ultimately about, you know, how we interact with these systems on the internet. You know, one thing that I was talking about recently, like, we open source a ton of stuff, and we have open source frameworks that developers can build on the platform to kind of like handle the top 10,000 things people say in conversation out of the gate. And the largest files are actually our profanity filters. There's something about humans and bots where humans just want to say horrible things on the internet. And it's actually really funny. We've been running an experiment with streaming Mitsuku as an avatar on Twitch TV in a group chat scenario. And there's this 4chan thread that's devoted to red pilling Mitsuku.
Oh, God.
A multi-year effort since everything happened. And we use a different type of learning where everything that's learned in conversation has to actually be approved by a human supervisor before globally. So you can corrupt the bot locally for your personal experience, but you can't corrupt it globally for other users. So these guys have been like working on taking Mitsuku down for a long time, and they found her on Twitch TV. So like they're storming the channel, and it's so funny. It's actually like they're unpaid labor training our profanity filters in ways that we didn't even expect. So that's great. But we've been banned from Twitch twice now because they have gotten through. But it's been a fun experiment.
That's actually super hilarious. It's like, welcome to the future. You have like these people trying to corrupt the bot that are actually training it, but they don't know that. But
thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that you said, you know, I totally agree with you as well. I think a lot of the team compositions for chatbot or even voice projects right now are sort of obscure as far as, you know, what is the best team composition in addition to what are workflows that work the best to drive these outcomes. So I mean, like, what do you see right now is like the primary bottleneck in these team compositions right now?
That's a great question. I think, to be somewhat vague, the tool that is going to win at the end of the day, because there's, you know, maybe 250 bot platforms now, is something that I heard. And a lot of people focus on building tools when I think they should have been focused on building bots first and then tools. But the tool that's going to win is going to put the knowledge expert, whoever that is at the company, in the position where they can update the bot as part of their existing workflow. And that's a little bit vague, but I think the bottlenecks are in like who owns the project after launch, how do they update it, and how do they get the data insights out of it. And one thing that we hear from a lot of bigger companies is this concept of dashboard fatigue. So, you know, you have your bot over here, your CRM over here, your live chat over here, your analytics over here. And there's a reason those are separate, because they're all, you know, hard problems in different services. But we definitely get the ask, like, can we just have one dashboard that does all of that? So I think at some point, you know, a company will evolve that is doing that, but has the dashboard that puts the person at the company, and it is someone inside the company, not a third party at the end of the day, because you know your business. Like, we don't know your business. We know how to build bots, but you know your business. So giving you the tools you need to update your bot, and including the workflows. Like, if you're an e-commerce company, like, you're an expert in selling clothes or whatever online, we're the bot expert. So it's really about empowering the domain experts at the organization to be able to update the system.
Yeah, no, I totally resonate with that, because like right now too, it's like we're trying to like delineate different roles, and it's like almost some of these platforms, it's sort of confusing who they were exactly built for. Because you're right, you know, when you look at the team composition, like you do have these knowledge experts that are going to be going into the actual conversation flows and tweaking them, and at the same time, you have like this assortment of different tool sets. But I think we begin to see currently some of these, more consolidated platforms begin to percolate. I know there's a couple that Gartner's been, given some shout outs to recently. But it'll be interesting how all that sort of comes together in regards to team composition and how those teams are using these more consolidated platforms to just make things a little simpler at this point.
Yeah, the problem is like there's a lot of really nice, I think, like UIs aimed at marketers that are trying to show you the insights from the conversational data and have a WYSIWYG builder experience.
Yeah.
You can't build a good chatbot using a WYSIWYG method. Like if you get onto our platform, you're going to be staring at code, and that's scary for some people. There is a learning curve. We do have no code ways to edit. But it's very surfacey. Like you actually do have to have an engineer involved to do any serious backend integration, or like serious complicated conversational design where you're keeping aware of context and collecting variables in order to complete a task. So like the best that we've seen so far was actually like one of our clients had like a live chat or bot automated chat on their website automating FAQs, and they set up a system where the agent could just flag a response up or down and then immediately piped back to the engineers who fixed the bot, which is not streamlined. That is a bottleneck, but like we know that that works because they got to 80% automation in 3 months and 5 savings in year 1. So we're trying like how do you productize that workflow and make it a little bit faster, but you do need cross-functional teams involved.
Absolutely. Cool. No, I love it. So now sort of moving to the future, we talked about initial successes. We talked about initial obstacles and failures. What's your vision for Pandorabots? Like, where do you see you guys, in the next maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, as far as positioning yourself within the marketplace right now?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think we would like to be powering about 50% of the bots in the world.
Cool.
It's possible we're there today. I don't know how many bots are out there. Yeah, I mean, I believe that every business will have a bot as the front line of defense for how they communicate with their customers. There's an expectation now that you're going to be available 24/7, that the conversation is going to be personalized, that I, as a consumer, can get instant answers. The only way to do that as a business, especially a small or medium-sized business, is with a bot. In fact, if you're an SMB and you add live chat, it actually increases your cost because you have to staff that. So bots are really the only solution for those types of businesses. But I also believe that we consumers, like I'm a big believer in the concept of the personal bot. We actually re-architected our platform in 2014 to support bot-to-bot communication. And most of our large-scale enterprise applications are actually a network of multiple bots that are experts in certain domains. There's an operator bot that routes traffic on the network. There's like a namespace bot that knows, what other bots are good at. We can ping the network and do a swarm response. So we're doing all kinds of complicated, crazy things. But I think that model also makes sense for us. Like we'll have a personal bot that knows our preferences. And I like the idea that my personal bot will know what data to share about me with what business and like who to let through, and like can coordinate on my behalf with other bots. So future, but I hope I live to see it.
No, I think it's maybe like 5-10 years off. I mean, personally, because it's like, well, but then again, right, we need to solve this NOU issue as well to sort of like make these cycles a little bit faster. But I think it's really cool that you guys are sort of building bots you want internally as well and experimenting with a lot of these like really cool sort of idolized things a lot of people in the community are talking about right now in regards to bot-to-bot pass-offs at scale. And I'm sure you guys are, playing with some multi-channel things internally as well, between chatbots and voice. So I think all that is all very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in terms of a business, so we have this developer platform. It's free. Anyone can sign up at Pandorabots.com. And we've been breaking records every month this year. So I think we're adding over 4,000 developers consistently every month. And a lot of those are individual hobbyists or developers inside of very big brands. So they kind of sell up through their organization internally and kind of build first, ask questions later, which we love. It's very much part of our culture too. But we have partnered with, really big brands like Coca-Cola and Toyota in verticals where we have a thesis where we think conversational technology can have a really big impact and business result, in the short term. So those verticals were shipping, insurance, retail and e-commerce, consumer packaged goods, cars. We do have some healthcare and fintech are a little bit tricky because they're highly regulated spaces, so moving a bit slower. But I do think healthcare, specifically on the insurance side, is going to be one of them. So we have a big brand partner for all of those use cases where we have personally partnered with them to build the bot and also experiment, test, and learn. And some of those applications have been live for 2 years now. Like our shipping partner has been online for almost 2 years, doing nearly 100 million messages a day.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Enterprise volume, serious savings to them. And people really love the bot. So you can, over, a multi-year investment, really capture everything that people will say in the context of package tracking and ordering, with continuous care and feeding and releasing new features on a rolling monthly basis to get to where we are today. So that's one of my favorites, because it's just like, I think having a brand client that sounds good is really awesome, but like the consumers, especially on some of the messaging platforms, the consumer engagement level has been a little disappointing. So I think like when we really think about enterprise, it's not just like the company you're working with is a big brand. It's like, what kind of volumes are you doing and what kind of results are you driving that like actually matter to this business's customers?
No, yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive into that a little bit. As far as like enterprise use cases that you guys are working with right now, are you seeing like a lot of line of business applications internally? Because I know, we see, as consumers, we see a lot of like B2C consumer facing bots. Can you maybe like elaborate on like some of the line of business applications? Because I know you're just talking about, shipping, and I don't know exactly what the use case is, but I find the line of business applications almost more interesting in regard to how they're streamlining internal workflows.
Yeah, so we've focused in terms of our professional services practice on B2C for a couple of reasons. The sales cycles are shorter in terms of like who you're working with at the company, and the impact is a little bit faster. And because like we see a lot of B2B use cases enabled on our platform, but they're usually originating from an IT department, and that type of user on our platform is more likely to be self-sufficient and not need anything from us. So we actually do have a number of large enterprises who are paying customers who are completely self-sufficient on the platform with whom we've never spoken to. And we don't really know much about what they're doing other than that we get paid every month. And like we can see like, oh, like this person's building bots in French and Spanish and English, and like seems like a support use case. So B2B, the market I think is just as big, but we don't specifically do those types of builds as much in our engagements because it's not where our thesis is, and we think people can build those internally themselves.
Fascinating. I guess another question too, like how do you guys, I guess, you said this yourself, like there's probably 250 platforms on the market right now. I mean, like what is the biggest differential for Pandorabots, when you look at all these other platforms right now that currently exist?
Yeah. Oh, how much more time do we have? No, I mean, I think like one thing, Norbots is market tested. Like if you want to look at bots that we've built and you want to see the technology in action, you can. Like we have case studies with real business results and referenceable clients. The language we're supporting, it's an open standard. So it's older than a decade. but it's, you know, being updated all the time. We recently, like the foundation behind it, released rich media updates. So we're using RCS messaging as the standard for what UI elements we support in messaging, which is kind of a modern trend. But the open standard is actually adopted outside of our platform. So we think there are probably, like, we have 250,000 developers, but we think there are probably 1 million AML developers worldwide.
Oh, wow.
You know, it shows up, like, if you just look on YouTube, like in Brazil and India, like it's taught in university courses. Like, we get a bunch of students signing up from all over the world at various times, learning the language. And our language underlies a number of other platforms, both from large companies and smaller startups, where, you know, the language is being written under the hood and it's obscured by a GUI. So anytime you're working in an open standard, it's something that's a little bit more stable, recognized, has a community behind it. And then the other thing is, like, we show you the code. We're a clear box, not a black box, or an open book, or whatever you want to say. So there's no mystery, there's no difficulty to debugging the system, because a scripting language is a primarily rule-based system. We have some machine learning tools. We can take large data sets and write rules from them. We use machine learning to make you, the human programmer, go faster. But we don't think machine learning is a silver bullet. It's really there to augment the supervised learning process and the creation of rules. And I think that's becoming pretty industry standard in terms of, like, people thinking about the problem, that a hybrid approach of rules and machine learning is the most effective production system today. So that's what we do. You can see all of your files, and you can download your files at any time. We've also open sourced, like, our platform is running an AML interpreter as a service, among other things. There are open source versions of the interpreter. There's, like, an amazing Python project that's contributed to almost every day by a VP of engineering at, like, a billion-dollar company. That's just his pet baby because he loves our language. So there's a lot of open source tools you can play with to avoid platform lock-in. And then we also just support this very wide spectrum of services. So you can do it yourself, we can do it for you, or we can help you get started and hand it off to you, which I think a lot of people like. And then we don't have a data problem. Well, we have a too much data problem, but, you know, I think a lot of brands that we talk to are nervous about piping all of their conversational data, which is insanely valuable, through a Google-owned system or an Amazon-owned system or Facebook-owned system. So as an alternative to that, I think we are attractive.
Cool. No, I love it. Very, very concise points. I totally have a much better understanding about how you guys are standing up from the crowd. And, you know, I think the 10 years plus the open source platform and, you know, not routing it through some of the other incumbents that probably are just scraping all your data, very compelling points. I love it. So in regards to, like, the ecosystem as a whole, really wanted to pick your brain on this area. What are, like, the current obstacles that you would prioritize need to be sort of solved right now before we can get to that next step, per se?
Well, we talked about the elephant in the room of the unsolved problem, which is natural language understanding. So I think if everybody's marketing department would just chill out, that would help a lot. Like, we don't need to talk about artificial general intelligence being almost here. Let's all collectively under-promise and over-deliver. And then consumer traction is the biggest thing. And people talk about this all the time, so I'll just be boring and repetitive, but, you know, these are widely known problems. Discovery. So I don't think there have been, you know, there hasn't really been a huge consumer hit that made a lot of money, as we've seen in the App Store days. And it's because consumers still don't have a strong awareness of where they can access this technology, specifically on newer messaging platforms. So I think, like, a lot of the research and data shows that consumers do, like, want to engage or willing to engage with automated experiences, particularly in younger demographics, and users are on messaging, but they don't necessarily know how to find these experiments. So experiences, not experimental, in some cases both. So I think like discovery and understanding where people actually are, like one trend that we've seen on the platform is that the website is still an insanely powerful channel. And making messaging available on the website, whether it's through Messenger's customer chat plugin or a native widget, is actually capturing really high volumes because the consumer expectation is I can go to your website to have a conversation with your brand. That's actually one of the reasons like we are excited about the .bot domain as like a potential opportunity to have a really dedicated discovery place for bots, and it's cool to be partnering with Amazon on that. But you know, there's a lot of different efforts and approaches. I do think my original vision many years ago was I would just open my phone and I would have all of my contacts there, and you know, it's just your message history, and I just scroll one over and it's all of the brands and business contacts, exactly like my friends, but I can mute and turn them off, and it's just two screens, and it's like the just yellow pages of businesses based on who I contact frequently. And I don't need to talk to most businesses every day. So the idea of like every business having a bot for like marketing is gonna get very annoying, like email marketing very soon. That's another part of like our thesis and the way we think about taking on big brand projects is like, what are the types of conversations that you actually need to have every day? And that's why the volumes are so high on the shipping use case, because a lot of people are getting several packages a week. So that's a case where the bot makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you make an interesting point too. It's just like, I think there is a significant onus on people that are building and deploying bots at this point to sort of not screw it up for the rest of us. Because, you know, I think sometimes it's probably just an evolutionary thing in regards to channels, in regards to signal versus noise at this point, you know, and what you're talking about having like two separate panes is almost like the automated folders in Google right now, where it just automatically is sorting those, you know. So I think it may be an eventuality. So it'll be interesting to see like if people are discretionary. Hopefully they are, because I like my bot experiences now, but I definitely don't want to get spammed by them every day in the next 2 years. So
yeah, we're in the wild, wild west right now, but it's an exciting place to be.
absolutely, very cool, very cool. So speaking of you know, some best practices potentially, since you've been in the space for over 10 years. Can you give our audience maybe like a handful of best practices for bot building at this point that you think are really important?
Yeah, so we already touched on one of them, which is like if you're designing a conversation, go to the physical space or witness the real conversations happening as step one, and make sure that you're solving a real problem where conversation is actually helpful and doesn't slow somebody down. So this is actually an example, somebody else's example, but I love it, so I'll use it. They were building a voice experience for a liquor store. And the first thing they did is their designers went into the store, and you know, they basically had a blank mandate. We just like, we know we want to do something in voice. We know we want it to be in the store. What do we do? And so they watched people, and people would stop in front of the whiskey shelf and just kind of scratch their head and seem like they didn't really know what to do. And they said, there, that's the case for conversation. This is where conversation makes sense and they can engage. So they built the experience, and I think they had, you know, 14% lift in sales in the first month, and then that doubled again in the second month. I don't know where they are today, but I think that anecdote is just so critical of like, go see where this paradigm actually makes sense, and then figure out how you would actually design the interaction in a way that's going to drive an outcome and be a positive experience for the consumer. And then I think everything I already said kind of leads into this. Like, make sure you have the right team, make sure you're involving engineers and writers at a minimum. Really understand the concept that a lot of the work happens after launch. I think, you know, we have very short attention spans in this day and age. Like, it's important that a UI makes us feel like we have a win in 5 minutes, but you're not done. You can put something out there, but you have to really analyze the logs and update the system constantly in order to improve it.
Definitely. I love those points. Now, I guess, going into like any specific resources per se, do you have any recommendations as far as books or people or videos people should check out if they're entering the bot space, or if they're already in the bot space and they're trying to sort of up their knowledge in chatbots or voice?
Well, my friend Amir Shavat wrote a cool book on designing conversational UIs. I think there's like a lot of really great conferences. I've been really lucky to be involved and speak at. Like, I just love this space so much. Like, it was kind of before the latest hype cycle. It was very lonely. Like, nobody believed us. I would say like bot, and they would be like, what? I remember talking to an investor in 2015 about chatbots, and I was like, they're going to be everywhere. And they're just like, you know what? Like, chatbot is not a sexy word. Like, sprinkle some more AI on there.
Yeah.
Try to change it. And I'm glad that we didn't, but it was lonely standing on the mountaintop, waving our arms and hoping someone would pay attention. And now it's just so cool because there's so many cool people in the space. So I think like going to the meetups, going to conferences, like reading what people are blogging about, like joining the Facebook groups, there's just really great energy, and your community is your best resource. And, podcasts like this one.
Cool. Thank you. So at this point, I just want to give you the stage and, tell people what's new about Pandorabots, what people can look forward to, where they can see you at upcoming events or things of that nature.
Yeah. So I'll be in Montreal at Startup Fest next weekend. Well, most of the major chatbot conferences, we will be there. And like also a lot of the major conferences, Mobile World Congress, South by Southwest, all those fun places. I think, right now we're always focused on making the platform better for developers. So we have a lot of cool stuff coming that we can't talk about. I've actually written my first patent.
Nice.
I'm not going to say it's a technology breakthrough, but it will be going into the platform within 6 months.
Cool.
So we're going to have like just some ways to hopefully make building faster, as you mentioned, being the goal, getting from 10 years to 5 years to a few months. And most of our enterprise builds are 1 to 3 months upfront, which is pretty short. But again, then it's like we release a new feature every single month. And at the end of a year, you have a more robust system. So I would just say we release multiple times a week, so there are always new cool features coming in. But by the end of this year, we'll have some even cooler stuff that I can't talk about yet.
Cool. Well, we all definitely look forward to it, and I can't wait to check some of that stuff out. Before we let you go, I always like to ask one question, especially in a field as emergent as this in the last couple of years. And also, since you've been in the space for 10 years, what is it that sort of keeps you motivated and inspired to wake up every morning to say, I'm going to continue to work on chatbots, even though everyone tells me, chatbots aren't sexy, they're not going to go anywhere.
I must be insane. I mean, just as a general caveat, I've been blessed or cursed with an insane optimism in life. And I think it's really good to like listen to your internal voices and learn to filter out the noise. Like, one of our company values is there's more than one way to do a thing. So tuning out like a lot of the hype stuff, a lot of noise about competitors, like the general Silicon Valley hamster wheel of like, the only thing that matters is how much money I raise. Like, that's very important for sanity. Personally, I'm like very motivated by a strong academic interest in the hard problem of natural language understanding and how language works, and like really trying to tackle that, because I think that's what's really going to catalyze the next wave and successes. But then above all, like, my team keeps me going. Everybody is there out of love and also insanity. We all share that in common. But you know, we don't pay very well relative to Facebook, for whom we are hiring pipeline, unfortunately. So yeah, but my team, you know, they're not there for the money. They're there because everyone is just loves bots, so excited about the problem, excited to be in the office with the energy we have. And if it weren't for them, I would have died and given up a long time ago.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We're super grateful for your time, and we'll definitely have you back in the future once you can maybe reveal some of those super secret features and maybe the patent that you can talk about in a couple months. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a good tease. Thank you so much for having me. It was so great to be here. And I look forward to coming back.
Cool. Sounds good. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.